Everyone. Welcome to Alliance Francaise de Pasadena. Once again, I'm Dan Slater. I'm president of the board of directors, and we have with us tonight a special guest indeed, the journalist and author Mike Finkel, who has written a fascinating and if you're into a page turner, I can recommend The Art Thief, with the subtitle, A True Story of Love, Crime, and a Dangerous Obsession. And it's all of those things about probably the most prolific individual art thief in history. A Frenchman from Alsace, Stefan Breitweiser, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this is the book about his escapades of art thievery around numerous, and I mean numerous, museums in France, Belgium, Switzerland, the Netherlands, even in Denmark while they're on vacation, he and his girlfriend. And our guest tonight, who has written a number of best-selling books. This is his latest, The Art Thief, published by Knopf. It debuted on the New York Times bestseller list, and it reads in part like like fiction because it's hard to believe, but it is a true story. And Mike Finkel, welcome to Alliance Francaise de Pasadena.
All right. Hello. Look at you guys.
Well, we're glad you're here, and we're looking forward to a presentation you're going to have for us, and we'll have lots of questions, no doubt. I did want to start with a question that you explain a bit in the book about how you came across this story and what motivated you to track it down, and actually spent quite a number of years pursuing the story and pursuing the protagonist, Stefan Breitweiser, and to produce this fascinating book.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and good evening. And I mean, some of you I can see, and some of you are just sort of like lurking around. So I can't read your faces, but I'm going to assume that maybe we haven't read the book, which is fine, and that we're going to do this in English tonight, though there will be une traduction français assez bientôt. There'll be a French translation somewhat soon. And if you want to ask me, si tu veux me poser des questions en français, if you want to ask me a question in French, go for it. So anyway, hello, good evening. Thank you for that kind introduction. So yeah, if there's one word, and also, by the way, greetings from Park City, Utah, here at 7,500 feet and 8 o'clock at night as I sort of am winding down my workday. But I did put on the fancy shirt for you guys, so that means I must be really trying to impress this I don't know, a little bit nerve-wracking crowd over here. I can see this is going to be a hard crowd to win over. Anyway, so basically a quick, if there was one word I think I would use to describe my work process, it would be inefficient. I spent 11 years on this project. So the protagonist, Stefan Breitweiser, or Breitweiser, but let's anglicize it to Breitweiser. He was born in 1971, so he's 53 years old. He's alive and, well, physically well. Mentally, we'll have to maybe discuss that. He had never spoken with an American journalist before, and we did all of our interviews in French. He speaks French fluently. That's his mother tongue, and he speaks German, but not much English, which is the reason probably why that you don't know this story. It took me 11 years. I read a little piece about Stefan Breitweiser in a French newspaper. One of the things I like to do as a journalist is to, especially I mean, I'm old enough and I'm looking around. It looks like everyone else seems to be slightly over 21 here that I can see. So we all remember pre-internet days, but when I used to subscribe to dozens of small town papers, and now I like to read them. And there's always interesting little articles here and there those are the articles that I look for. I'm not a daily newspaper reporter. I was when I was a kid, but I look for topics, amazing stories that sort of fall between the cracks. I read a small town news report, and there were like 3 things in this news report that were journalistic catnip. First of all, was just the sheer number of art thefts that Stefan Breitweiser committed. Now, museums have been open for about 250, 300 years since the 1700s. And I've spent the entire COVID period reading about art crime. Pretty much all those books behind me are all art crime books. That's my show-off wall. And I can tell you that the second most prolific thief that I could find outside of war, outside of the Nazis, outside of an army, but just a single thief or a gang of thieves stole from 19 different museums. That's the second most prolific in all of history I could find. Stefan Breitweiser stole from 201 different places, 300 pieces in total. He often stole more than one piece, with an estimated value up to $2 billion. But that wasn't even what made me most interested about this story. I really liked the way he stole. Breitweiser stole non-violently, always during the day, during opening hours of a museum, often with guards and tourists in the room. We're going to discuss how he did that. And he was accompanied by his accomplice, his girlfriend. Her name was Anne Catherine Kleinklaus. They were boyfriend and girlfriend. They started stealing when they were in their young 20s, like 23 or 24 years old. They started stealing in about 1995, and they were on an incredible crime spree for about 10 years, till about 2005, in which they averaged one theft every 12 days for almost a decade, which is incredible. But even the nonviolent sort of street magician style, and you got the numbers, neither of those were what really pushed me into journalistic obsession. And that was what Breitweiser did with the paintings that he stole. And not just paintings, he also stole sculptures and silver objects like goblets, and even some quotidian pieces that were he found to be beautiful, like medical kits from the Renaissance era. He 99 less than 1 in 1,000 art thieves, or 999 of every 1,000 art thieves steal for the same reason, which is to get money. They want to fence it and get money. But Breitweiser, practically unique in the annals of crime, stole all these 200 times, 300 pieces, $2 billion, just to hang them in his bedroom and admire them. And that, to me, was like the perfect storm of stories, because I really like a anti-hero, someone that you may be able to root for. Now, before we get into so I read this little piece about him. I called a French journalist friend of mine, Agnès, and then Agnès said to me, "Oh yes, here in France we know about Breitweiser, but he doesn't talk to journalists." And so I really like a challenge like that, and I started by writing him a handwritten letter, that is pen, paper, envelopes, stamps, all the things that my children do not even know about. And I wrote it in my mediocre, I mean, I guess you can't really tell someone's accent over a letter, but you can still tell whether someone knows the subjunctive or not. And il faut que je apprenne. I mean, I got to learn it. So in my mediocre French, I wrote him a letter. And this is when I was living in Bozeman, Montana. It took him about 8 months to respond to my letter. And just by the time he responded to my letter, which I'd sent to Bozeman, Montana, and he returned to my address in Bozeman, Montana, I had moved with my wife and my 3 young kids to Aix-en-Provence in the south of France. Had nothing to do with Stefan Breitweiser, the art thief, but everything to do with wanting to learn French and expose my children and myself and my wife to another culture. And so the person who was collecting my mail in Montana got the letter from Breitweiser and sent it back over the Atlantic Ocean, and eventually got to me in France. And we sent letters back and forth to each other for 4 years, gradually getting a little more friendly. I still never ventured into the 2 until we met each other, but it was slightly more formal. And anybody who spent time in France or is French knows how formal the society is. And so finally, he agreed to meet me for lunch, but he told me no pen, no paper, no tape recorder, just an informal meeting. We met each other for lunch. Apparently, he found my accent charmant, and or he put up with me, and he agreed to sit for some interviews. And I ended up spending more than 40 hours with Stefan Breitweiser. We did about 30 hours of very formal interviews, and we went on a couple of road trips, and I'll show you some pictures. Most fascinating of all, we visited some of the museums from which he stole, which was a great moral conundrum. As a journalist, I'm like following the subject of my book around, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do if he steals something? Am I going to just turn my own subject into the police? And fortunately, I did not have to make that decision. So before we get into any questions, let's take a look at some photos, if you don't mind, although I'm getting tired of hearing my own voice. But let's take a look at some photos. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to assume that you can see this picture.
We can.
Shout if you can. So all the pictures that you're about to see from Europe are just ones that I took while traveling around. I mean, this is the village of Thann, Thann, in the Alsace region. The Alsace region is in northeastern France. It's sort of where Germany, Switzerland, and France meet. It's half German speaking, like all the menus there are in both German and in French. It's funny, they've changed the Alsace region has been shuttled between France and Germany. I think they've shifted it 5 times in the last 250 years. And I mean, French people, I'm not gonna make fun of them, but shoot, I lived there long enough to know, their foibles. They love to complain. And so all the people I met in the Alsace region were like, we should be German again. The economy is better over there. The salaries are better. And, and as soon as Germany takes over Alsace, they'll be like, we should be French again. The food is so much better over there. Anyway, so this is just a photo of the village of Thann, one of the villages museums from which Breitweiser stole. He's tended to steal from small town museums. This is what Stefan Breitweiser looks like. This was around the time of his first trial. Yes, he does get caught. I'm not going to give too much away. Bright blue eyes, this, baby face, just the scruff of a beard here. And this is when he's in his mid 30s. So he really, I think one of the psychologists that Breitweiser and I, over the years that it took me so long to build up a relationship with him. Over the 11 years I worked on it, we built up so much trust that he actually gave me signed, written permission to read his psychology reports, which was a beautiful gift. I mean, I cannot endorse a single thing that Breitweiser did, but I can tell you that he gave me the most valuable thing in the world that he now owns. He doesn't own any art anymore, which is his story. And I did not pay him for it. And he had no editorial control. So, and let me see his psychology report. So I am, despite the fact that Breitweiser is a big criminal, grateful to him. Let's see. Oh, this is just another beautiful picture of a village in the Alsace. I don't even know what slide's coming next, so I have it on slideshow mode. So let's all be surprised together. I think this is looks like a shot from Strasbourg. Okay. This is one of the first items Breitweiser stole. This is a pistol from the 1700s. I will get to how he stole these things in a few minutes, but let's go through some of the items he stole. Everybody, if I said to you all, imagine something beautiful, and I asked you to write it down and tell me, I bet we would all come up with something different. Thankfully, we don't, and some people find a sunset to be beautiful, a lover, a Picasso. Everybody has their own sort of likes. Breitweiser, ever since he was young, was obsessed with the late Renaissance and early Baroque, and that is like the 16th and 17th century Northern European works of art. And when I say Northern European, I'm meaning there was sort of like a dividing line in Europe between the tempera, which was more like Italy in the south, and the oil paints of the north, most famous by the Flemish and Dutch painters. And oil paints are a lot brighter, they have a lot more color. Tempera is a little more muted, and Breitweiser was just infatuated by these colors. He truly hate them or respect him, or both. All of his psychologists, I saw 5 different psychologist reports, and I spent a lot of time with them, and everybody who knew him said the same thing, which is that he truly was obsessed with these works of art. As I mentioned, he just kept them in his room. Let's go over a few. This is a Albrecht Dürer engraving. Dürer is one of the most famous of the German late Renaissance artists. This is a Cranach. This is probably worth $50 million, $100 million. This is one of his favorite things that he stole. This was a Boucher. This is a Sleeping Shepherd. This is a beautiful still life by Jan van Kessel, a Flemish painter, Dutch Flemish painter. This was Cornel de Lion. This was a beautiful painting of one of the kings of France's daughter, and it was picked by a team of art historians as one of the most important paintings in France, and it was hanging in a museum for something like 160 years until Breitweiser came along and stole it. And let's just go through some of Breitweiser loved these bright oil paintings with a lot of color and life. This is a snuff box that Napoleon himself commissioned and gave out to people as gifts. And Breitweiser kept this on his nightstand. More paintings. He stole items in gold. This is a medallion. He stole wood carvings. This is a scene from the life of Christ. Everybody take a look at this for a little while. This is one of his very favorite things that he stole. This is in the first chapter of the book, if anybody has opened it. This is Adam and Eve sculpted out of ivory by a German carver, George Patel, from I think it's early 1700s. And this is one of Breitweiser's most cherished items. Another piece of ivory, Three Graces. This is a huge tapestry, 10 foot by 10 foot. Now, I'm not a math major, but that sounds like 100 square feet to me. And we'll get into how he stole that too. This looks a little foreshortened. This is about a 2 foot high chalice. The top comes off, and there is an coconut in the middle of it. It's solid silver, German late 1600s. This is something called an obrello. This is a apothecary jar, quite old and valuable. Another 2 foot tall chalice, this one with an ostrich egg implanted in it. And more so, this is a beautiful, this is like bigger than a basketball. This is a beautiful, totally solid silver warship that was used as a centerpiece of a table in the Renaissance era. And Breitweiser stole it right out of one of the biggest museums in Europe, the Art and History Museum in Brussels, Belgium. More silver, gold, that's a nautilus shell and silver. More paintings, more. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to show this to you because it took me so dang long to make this slide. This is a list of all 201 crimes of Stefan of Breitweiser. And you do not have to read it. It's just pretty overwhelmingly impressive. Here's a map. This is in the book. This is where he stole. You can see his house in the middle of the page. You can see in Eastern France right there. And every dot there is one of his thefts. He really loved Switzerland. It's in that pull-out box over there. It was the way Switzerland was drawn. It would be painted all black. And you can see that he stole out from Belgium, a little bit in Germany, a lot in Switzerland, and all around France. Now, I want to stress that The Art Thief, the book that I wrote, isn't based on a true story. It's not 99% of a true story. It is as true a story as I can possibly put together, and I hired 2 independent fact checkers. It's very important for me, especially for a story that is literally unbelievable, for it also to be true. And Breitweiser himself had an amazing head for his crimes. When I interviewed him, he not only went through each of his crimes and often like step by step through a museum, but he often drew diagrams exactly where things were located, how he broke into display cases. And then on top of that, I got the police reports for all 201 of his crimes. Then I interviewed the lawyers that represented him, the investigators that were chasing after him. Like I said, I got a hold of his psychology reports. I interviewed everyone but his mother and his girlfriend, but I interviewed plenty of people who knew them. And these are just some examples of some of the things he drew for either me or for the police, describing, like, these are just detailed drawings from memory of dimensions and things that he stole. And we'll get to why he had to draw these. This is like the layout of a room where stairs were, where he stole, where there was a camera, how he was able to avoid it. And anyway, I double checked everything with the police reports. If there were any discrepancies, I went back to the police, I went back to Breitweiser, and I just tried to resolve any differences. And if I couldn't, I said, well, Breitweiser says this. So I leave it up, so when you read this book, if you read this book, please know that this is a true story. If it wasn't true, I would probably change a few things around, perhaps the ending, but it's not a piece of fiction, it's true. Okay, just really quickly before I open this up to questions, do you remember that Adam and Eve ivory that I stopped on for a while? This is the Rubens house museum in Antwerp, Belgium. And this is the home of Peter Paul Rubens. And this is one of the museums. This is the museum from which Breitweiser stole the Adam and Eve ivory. And during our extensive interviews, we drove from the Alsace region about 5-6 hours north to this museum. And Breitweiser wanted to go inside and show me how exactly he stole things. Now, how did Breitweiser steal things? How did he even enter museums? He entered museums often with his girlfriend through the front door. He would buy a ticket only in cash and walk in. His only tools that he used really were a Swiss Army knife, and he often wore a loose-fitting jacket, especially during the cool months. But really, he relied on a lot of psychological acumen and like really able to read a room. When you think of art thieves, real art thieves. So when you think of art thieves, you might be thinking of like Ocean's 11, George Clooney, the Thomas Crown Affair, Dr. No. Those are fictitious art thieves, people. Almost all fictitious art thieves seem to be these debonair aesthetes that are stealing for the pleasure of it. That is not what real art thieves do. Real art thieves, if I said, think about a real art thief, you might think about the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which was robbed in 1990 by 2 men, 11 pieces worth about $500 million. Those pieces have not been found. So when I said to Breitweiser, I mentioned the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, Breitweiser said to me, "Ugh, I hate being called an art thief." This is funny because he is the most prolific art thief of all time. And I said, why? And he specifically mentioned what those 2 men who broke into the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum did. First of all, they came at night. They were wearing fake police uniforms and they were let in by the night guards. They immediately attacked the night guards, bound their faces with duct tape, and handcuffed them to pipes in the basement. So first of all, already violent crime, absolutely against Breitweiser's ethos, but that is not why Breitweiser hates being called an art thief or compared to those guys. It's what they did next. The 2 Gardner thieves walked up to the most fabulous work in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, a Rembrandt seascape called on the Sea of Galilee. I'll show a picture of it later. And they stuck a knife in it. And they carved the canvas out of its frame, cutting along the outside. They basically ruined this painting. So Breitweiser, he would never stick a knife in a canvas. When he stole a painting, by the way, Breitweiser actually worked in a frame shop for a while. This is what kind of an expert thief he was. He also worked as a security guard in a museum for a while. So he really got this insider knowledge. When he took a painting off a wall, he would turn it upside down and remove the frame. There's usually clips, nails, or ribbons on the back that you can remove. And then he would steal the painting. Most of the paintings he stole, as was common in the Renaissance when canvas was expensive, were on wood. But if it was on wood or if it was on paper, he knew that an unframed work was like as delicate as a newborn baby. And he would very gently put it against the small of his back and put his jacket over it and walk out of the museum. When he stole things from a display case, most display cases have a little sliding panel that you can open up to access that. And those panels are usually locked with quite a modern lock. You do not have to pick this lock. If you picture what a display case looks like, whether it's a squashed cube or just a cubic thing that's usually made out of tempered glass or plexiglass or something like that, but the edges are always fused with silicone glue. If you have a Swiss Army knife and you open up the sharpest blade of your knife and you perform a little surgery horizontally and vertically along these seams and cut through the silicone glue, I hope you're all with me here, you could open up the panels just enough to snake your hand through and steal something like the Adam and Eve ivory, like those chalices that you saw. And then because the panels want to rest in their original position, you just push them into place. Sometimes he would actually take a ballpoint pen, reach his hand in and sort of rearrange the box so it looked like nothing was missing for a guard passing by. You remember I said Breitweiser worked as a guard. And guards, after a couple of days on the job, stop seeing the artwork. They just sort of look at people. And so a little bit of rearranging makes, gives you a couple of extra minutes before someone notices the crime. You push the case back together. It looks like the case has been untouched. The lock has never been touched the entire time. You put the object at the small of your back. You put your jacket over it. You signal your girlfriend who's been on lookout for guards, and you walk right out the front door. That's how you steal something. All right, so I went to the Rubens House Museum with him. Now, this is not the greatest slide, but there's Breitweiser in the middle of one of the rooms in the Rubens House Museum from which he stole the Adam and Eve ivory. Now, Breitweiser is banned from most museums in Europe. He does not wear eyeglasses. Those are fake eyeglasses, and he just put a baseball cap low on his head, and he figured no one would catch him, and no one did. Now, if you look at this picture, the reason why I like this picture is you can see very clearly the silicone glue that he sliced it, that sort of shining thing in the foreground. If you waited till, sometimes, like I mentioned, how could Breitweiser steal when guards were in the room? Doesn't that sound impossible? We'll get to that reason. Also, by the way, when you go through a museum with an art thief, you have to stop at something like this to see where all the secret emergency or unalarmed exits are. So you would always study the maps of a museum like this, that big empty space in the middle is the courtyard that he cut through. Okay, so this is not the greatest of pictures, but the day I visited Breitweiser, the very room from which he had stolen the Adam and Eve ivory 21 years previous, the one guard in the room, there she is sitting in her chair the entire time she was staring at her cell phone. Breitweiser easily could have stolen a piece, and she would probably not have looked up from TikTok or whatever it was she was watching. And that was not an unusual situation. But also, if you take a tour through the museum with the greatest art thief, he's going to explain to you that this painting is, those two eyelets right there should be connected with some sort of lock. This you could just lift right off the wall. And to this day, many museums really are a little bit lax on security, and we can discuss why a little bit later. Okay, there is Breitweiser himself looking at the Adam and Eve ivory that he had stolen 21 years before, and there it is entombed in that plexiglass case that he had unscrewed the top from the bottom and was able to steal it. And we'll talk about more about this in a little bit. There it is again. I mentioned that Breitweiser put all of the $2 billion worth of art, the 300 pieces he stole, in his bedroom. Well, Breitweiser's full-time job was art thieving. He didn't sell them, so that's just a fancy way of saying he was unemployed. He was unemployed freeloader, and he lived, this is his mother's house. His parents got divorced when he was a teenager. His mother purchased this house in the Mulhouse suburbs, Mulhouse being an industrial city in Alsace, one of the least attractive cities in all of France. And they lived in this modest house. The mother lived on the ground floor, and there's two upper windows at the top. There are the attic rooms. Breitweiser had a salon, or a little sitting room, and a bedroom, where the ceilings were sort of slanted because he was up in the combles, the attic. And this is where he put all of his works of art. I had an artist draw what the rooms looked like, maybe at the height of their glory. He had a 4-poster bed in the middle of the room that he and his girlfriend Anne-Catherine slept in, and literally there were just works of art absolutely everywhere. Now, I want to share with you one thing tonight. This is a 50-second video, and this took me pretty much, like I said, I worked on this for more than a decade, and it wasn't until almost the very end of my research that I was able to get this home video that Breitweiser filmed in his attic room. This was I think it was in 96, 95, it's mentioned in there. So this is basically when the room was like 1/5, 1/7 as full as it got. But I want you to see what it looked like. And I also want to note that this video was not located in time for his trials, and it really would have changed the whole tenor of his trials if they had it. So this is something not even the police were able to see. And I'm just going to press start. It's in French, but I put some English subtitles in. And this is a 50-second video, and we're going to pretty much end the slideshow with this, and just take a look at real life tour of his room in the late 90s.
Hermès, Rosenthal. Icône 19e siècle. Pistolet 19e siècle. Éteint. Coup de sifflet Saint-Louis. Oh. Les œuvres d'art en question que j'avais donc volées, ils étaient dans deux chambres, donc à savoir un salon particulier que j'avais et une chambre à coucher. Parce que ma mère avait quand même des amis qui venaient régulièrement à la maison, donc je me voyais pas en train de laisser traîner un cranac ou un ivoire du XVIIe siècle en bas dans le salon. En maître Napoléon III. C'était un monde que je me suis créé et où je me sentais bien avec eux. C'était un petit peu casser un peu la routine de la vie actuelle, stress, métro, dodo, boulot, toutes ces conneries. Et c'est, je sais pas, cette modernité que je n'apprécie pas trop. Iwa.
So that's the video. I had to block out Anne-Catherine's face because there are some strict laws in Europe. She did not grant permission to be shown, but that's his girlfriend lounging in the four-poster bed. And I'm going to conclude things in a minute. This is just the beautiful Wagner Museum, and I think we're going to end with one more beautiful shot of Europe, and then just for you folks tonight, maybe what I dressed as for Halloween last year. There we go. All righty. And then I'll say one more thing before I open it up to questions, and this will sort of give you an indication of where the questions go. So you might be wondering, what happened to that Adam and Eve ivory? He stole it. It was in his bedroom for many years, but then it made it back to a museum. Like what happened to his artwork? And I will tell you that you'll never guess what happened to his artwork. That I got to keep a couple of things. I mean, come on, I can't give the whole story away, but like any good Icarus story, the higher you fly to the sun, the harder you're going to crash. And I don't think anybody took more risks or took more daring, had more moments of daring do than Breitweiser and his girlfriend. But when the end came, it came in the ending is as horrific and as unpredictable. I almost like the denouement, the crash, as much as I like the rise. So it really is a rise and fall story. And I hope some of those pictures were some help to you. Now, I've babbled quite long enough. Dan, do you want to be the MC? You can choose who's going to ask questions, open to just about any question you want. We got 20 minutes or so.
Sure thing. Well, I wanted to get to first the obsession part.
Yeah.
Yes. So perhaps you can tell us about the obsession part, because you did review, and it's in the book, some of the psychological stories or reports. And he certainly had a capacity for stealing, and he had a big knowledge of art in the periods that you mentioned. But is there some theory or conclusion that you came to about his motivations for as you say, as a freeloader, an itinerant waiter, security guard, etc., to take this capacity for thievery to such a unbelievable extent?
So in other words, what's wrong with this guy?
With this guy?
What's wrong with this guy? Of course. Now, before I go any further, I want to say that I think that I can discuss with everyone here all the problems with modern society from now until like next September. But one of the great goods of modern society are museums. I've been a museum goer. My parents love to go to museums. They brought me to museums. We do not have to be a billionaire to see some of the most valuable and precious and beautiful works of art in the world. We can just pay a modest admission fee and go to museums. They are one of the marvels of modern society. Again, it seems like a long time, but before 1750, nobody, only rich people could have a piece of work of art, and nobody like the rest of us could see it. And so the mission of a museum is to put you as close as possible to these amazing works of art and not make you feel encumbered by security. And Breitweiser was a cancer on modern society. He took advantage of this sort of trust that we all people that go to a museum, I mean, there's not glass in front of most paintings. You could take a knife and slash it. You could throw acid onto it, but we sort of all as a society have agreed that that's not what we're going to do. We're going to enjoy these works of art. And I really, although I sort of speak warmly or jocularly about Breitweiser, I cannot stress enough how, damn it, if there were more people like Breitweiser, there would be no more museums. In fact, museums could end all museum crime tomorrow morning, but they would have to put bars in front of paintings and guards with machine guns in the rooms, and that wouldn't be a museum anymore. It would just be a bank. So that said, so what's wrong with Breitweiser? I was able to read, as I mentioned, his psychology reports. He claimed that he wasn't really stealing that he loved. It was the works of art. Now, while all the psychologists did note that it was clear that Breitweiser was in love with these works of art, or else he would have tried to just sell them. He really did not try to sell them. Obviously he also was obsessed with stealing and getting away with it and feeling powerful. And maybe some of you are thinking, he's a kleptomaniac. And I don't like to get into the weeds. What happens between someone's ears is, to this moment, a mystery to all of us, even psychologists. But there's a classic definition of kleptomania, and Breitweiser doesn't fit at all. A kleptomaniac really doesn't care what he or she steals. It's really about the act of stealing. And most telling kleptomania, a kleptomaniac that steals is always followed by a letdown steeped in shame and regret. You kind of don't want to steal, but you can't help yourself. Breitweiser was absolutely the opposite of that. He was very specific about what he stole. He would pass by 100 objects in the museum that he could steal, but he wouldn't steal them because he had to love what he stole. Now, he couldn't steal everything that he loved. Sometimes it was too big, well guarded, too crowded, just too risky, but he had to love what he stole, and he never felt regret. He felt the opposite of that. He felt celebratory, and there's a reason why there was a 4-poster bed in there. He and Anne-Catherine liked to make love in front of their new acquisition, which is something you probably shouldn't do in a museum in front of the Mona Lisa. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It'd probably be frowned upon. That I think I've babbled on long enough, but this is a long way of saying that the psychologists actually could not come up with a diagnosis. Breitweiser is such an outlier. As I mentioned, no one has stolen more than 19 works of art, and that gang only stole to sell them. He's such an outlier with the number of thefts, the skill that he used to steal them, and then the aesthetic obsession that he displayed, that he was basically undiagnosable. All the psychologists took these crazy stabs at what might be his problem, but nobody could really settle on something. One of the ones that I thought was interesting that I really liked was this sort of, I'll just put it in layperson's terms because I'm thinking of it in French and I'm translating it in my, anyway, which was basically this inability to, basically he had no self-control, like all of us. I mean, I'll speak for myself. When my wife and I go to a museum, and I'm going to bet that I'm not the only person, or my wife and I aren't the only couple that have this conversation. We love to go to a museum, and then we'll stop in front of a work that really compels us, and we'll whisper to each other, man, wouldn't that look good over the sofa? I mean, all of us have that thought. It goes in one ear, you laugh, and it goes right out the other ear. Now, Breitweiser, he followed through with that. He basically couldn't control his obsessions, and sort of one of the psychologists had a very fancy way of saying that basically he just had no self-control, but there was no real reason that anyone could come up with, because he is such an outlier. All right, any other? Let's see what else. Who else got questions?
Catherine, you had a question, Catherine Gavsey?
Yeah, just a quick one. When you talked about his methods and the nonviolence and how he would go in the front door and do this, and I could not help thinking, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, of Arsène Lupin, the gentilhomme cambrioleur. Now, did this come up in your conversations with your art thief at all?
I am so happy that you mentioned that. So Arsène Lupin, for those of us who are not familiar with that, is a fictitious, by the way, not real, fictitious French thief that was a gentleman thief. In fact, there's a new Netflix show called Lupin, based on that. I watched it in French with my son, and we enjoyed it very much. But Arsène Lupin is not at all known in the United States, so I didn't use it in my book, but so well known in France that the headlines for all of his trials was like the Arsène Lupin of the museums, or the Arsène Lupin of France. So he was often called the Arsène Lupin. One of those books behind me is I think I bought, oh yeah, this one right here, Arsène Lupin. That's one in English, and I got one in French there. I actually was not familiar with Arsène Lupin because I'm trop American until I started working on this, and they're fun little stories. They're like Sherlock Holmes sort of things, but Sherlock Holmes, of course, is a detective, and so they're fun. So yes, that came up all the time. And Breitweiser himself, I told you he hated to be called an art thief. I'll tell you what he liked to be called in a second. He did not mind the comparison, because that Arsène Lupin, despite being fictitious, was the type of thief that Breitweiser fancied himself to be, a gentleman thief, a thief of high, with high morals, if that even makes sense. So when I asked Breitweiser, if you don't want to be called an art thief, what do you want to be called? And I remember his answer quite vividly, translating from the French. He said to me, I would like to be called a collector with an unorthodox acquisition style. That's what he called it. A collector with an unorthodox acquisition style. Fair enough, Stefan, fair enough. I do like interviewing criminals. This is my third sort of true crime book. So listen, I mean, the heroes of the world, I completely admire the nurses and doctors and soldiers and firefighters. Those are amazing people. I am like in awe of them, but they're like a distant star. I can't even understand how great they are. I'm a flawed human being myself, head to toe, and some reason it is the scallywags and the criminals that really interest me, especially ones that you can almost understand where they're coming from. I mean, who amongst us? You don't have to raise your hands, but I'm going to say that who amongst us wouldn't like to make love to your lover in front of $2 billion worth of art hanging in your bedroom? I mean, sign me up for that right now. That sounds fantastic. So, I mean, do you really want to see, do you think Leonardo da Vinci, when he was painting the Mona Lisa, said, oh, I know how this painting should be seen. There should be 700 people elbowing themselves with a bunch of selfie sticks, pushing each other aside just to get a 2-second view of the back of someone's head and a little bit of a smile. No, that is not what Leonardo da Vinci thought. You should probably see a work of art at your bedroom at night with a glass of wine in your hand and your lover right next to you. That is a beautiful way to see it. And Breitweiser felt that very strongly. Not endorsing what he did, but he's crazy. He's a criminal. He deserved to go to jail, but he's not entirely wrong all the time. And I don't even know what the question I was answering was. Let's go on to another one.
Well, you did mention in the book something that I think it was him noted, that the history of art is the history of art thievery.
I mean, I think I mentioned at the outset, ever since museums have opened in the Age of Enlightenment, I think 1760 was the British Museum, the first public museum people have been stealing. But even way before that, literally some of the earliest existing writing, which are papyri from Egypt, one of the first things we wrote about. I think I picked a topic that's not original, even though I love Stefan Breitweiser. There was papyrus written about the Scrooge, the terrible activities of tomb raiders, and this is 5,000-year-old writing. Everybody, basically, one of the things that an invading army did to make you not only defeat you, but also sort of to sting you was to steal your works of art from the conquistadors in South America and Central America, raiding the Aztecs and the Incas, to, of course, the Nazis in World War II. Hitler was trying to make a museum of all the greatest artworks in the world. Napoleon basically stole works of art to endow the Louvre. And the British Museum, the first museum ever to open and one of the greatest museums in the world, let's just go with their 3 most famous works. Let's go Rosetta Stone, stolen from Egypt. let's go Benin bronzes, stolen from Africa, and the Elgin marbles stolen right off the Parthenon in Greece. So that's that. Again, Breitweiser basically said everyone's a thief in the art world. No one's more of a thief than freaking Christie's and Sotheby's, ripping people off. Again, he's not entirely wrong, but that doesn't make him any less of a criminal. So it's a very fascinating subtopic that I'd like to. I don't like to have too much history in a book. This 11 years, but it's 205 pages. I got 3 children. I do not have a lot of free time in my life. I've gotten right to the point. If I didn't think it was super important, I'm not going through all 201 thefts. I just picked my 10 or 12 favorites. I like to keep things tight. I like to finish a book. I live in near Salt Lake City. I live in Park City. I spent a lot of time in Europe. If I can't go from Salt Lake City to Charles de Gaulle and finish the book, then it's too long. So this is
it can be finished in that time frame.
Salt Lake City to Charles de Gaulle.
Like I mentioned, it's a page turner, and then in fact the reviews, and it's been reviewed in all the major publications and beyond. I should have mentioned, widely reviewed, with a by the way, very interesting, extensive discussion in a lengthy article in the New Yorker. All did, I think, agree that your book truly is a page turner, because the descriptions of the individual thefts that you picked out to talk about are so astounding as to to me, the degree of difficulty that he did not see as difficulty. He had his brain was able to determine what could be stolen and how to do it and how to get out of the museum and do it for almost a decade. It's remarkable, really.
I mean, since I'm assuming most people haven't read the book, if you want to give me 3 minutes, I can describe what he told me was his greatest art theft of all time, which was at the Museum of Art and History in Brussels, Belgium.
Yeah, please.
He and Anne-Catherine walked in the door, paid their ticket in cash, walked right in. Breitweiser has an amazing ability to note all of the security cameras, and not just the security cameras, know within inches the range of vision of these cameras and avoid them. This is why he had so much trouble getting caught. He would move his way through a museum and just not be filmed. It was amazing. He knew sort of innately the boundaries of a human security guard's observation. He almost always stole at lunchtime. And the reason why he stole at lunchtime is not only are there slightly fewer tourists, but the problem with security guards is that they're human. They get hungry. Almost all museums at lunchtime will either cut their security staff in half, so half can eat while half are on patrol, and then the other half will eat while the other half are on patrol, or sometimes in a third. But no matter what, in that lunch break, there are much fewer guards in the museums. They have to eat. You can't just tell someone you can't eat all day, and so they don't hire guards for the lunch break. And so there's so if any of you guys. Some of you guys have your cameras off. I don't know who's taking notes here. Anyway, he walks into the Art and History Museum in Brussels. He sees a display case in the medieval room. If you guys were listening carefully, he really likes Renaissance stuff. Medieval stuff was a little too serious and religious for him. And he sees, look at that. A thief has already been here. There's a bunch of blank spots in a display case. And he was dissatisfied with it because the thief didn't move things around to make it look untouched. So he goes up to this display case and he sees a index card bent in half like a tent sitting there in the case, and it said in French, objects removed for study. That's all it said. And Breitweiser, as Dan was saying, was able to spontaneously come up with genius steps. You would have to give me months to figure this out, but literally he sees this case with this card in it and boom, has an idea. He does that silicon slice that I was talking about. He reaches in and all he steals from that case is the index card, pockets it, goes to the Renaissance room. Now, do you remember seeing those 2 chalices, one with an ostrich egg in it and one with a coconut? Those are, and that silver warship, solid silver warship. He goes to a huge display case in the Renaissance room. There's not a camera on it. The guards they're shifting in lunch. So there's barely a guard coming every 6-7 minutes. He has plenty of time. He cuts that case open. He steals a couple of those chalices, and he puts, instead of rearranging something, he puts the object removed for study card in, pushes the panels back together, puts the chalices, I think he feeds one up his sleeve, puts one in Anne-Catherine's purse and one in his back, walks out of the museum, goes to his car. They stayed in a hotel room that night in Brussels. The next day he's thinking, I wonder if this is possible. They go back to the museum. No one has reported the crime. Everyone who sees these missing things sees that little bent in half index card, and they're like, not a crime. Goes back to that case, steals 3 or 4 more items, drives home to France, puts them in that beautiful room that you saw, waits a couple of weeks, thinks, is it possible? He's read nothing about a theft in the newspaper, goes back to that museum for the 3rd time with Anne-Catherine. Nobody's reported anything missing, and basically empties out the case and drives home. Breitweiser told me that the greatest art stealing tool of all time was a bent in half index card. So that is a method. Like, no approval there. Not thrilled with that action, but wow, kind of impressively well done. Anyway,
Yeah.
I saw that maybe
Lindy had a couple of questions.
All right, go for it. We got a few more minutes.
Lindy, you could unmute yourself and go for it.
Sure. I'll actually turn on my video as well. A couple of questions, and I was hoping I texted these or messaged these first, so
Okay.
as to hopefully not spoil it for anybody. But at the end, there was a mention in the epilogue, I believe, there was a mention of him committing additional crimes more recently, and that him having a trial scheduled for 2023. Is that what's happening right now, or what is he doing right now?
Where's Breitweiser now? Okay, yeah, well, I'm not going to mention how exactly he gets caught, although after 201 crimes he does, and what happens to the artwork, which is, anybody guesses that? And no one's going to guess what happens to it. It's impossible to guess. I mean, you might one of the questions you're like, has he lived in his mother's house? Did his mother know what he was doing? I'll give you this much. Yeah, he did. She did know what he was doing. So let's just put that to the side. So Breitweiser is so the last third of the book is a little bit, it's the wings melt and the crash is severe, and not only does Breitweiser get caught and and spends a lot of decent amount of time in prison, he gets out, and one of the first things he does is he steals art again. I'll tell you that much. And the last time I saw him was at his trial in March, which is April, May, June, July, August, September, like 5 months ago, again for stealing art. And so this book starts, basically in the mid-90s with his stealing, and it goes up till 5 months ago, which is, it brings you right through to the present. So I will just say right now that he is under the control of the French penal system. And I was able to see him in March. And maybe you're like, did he like the book? I sent him the book. He said to me, I had written a magazine article about him before, which he made his way through. I didn't translate it into French, so he said, it was a little hard for me to read, but I respected what you wrote, which is, by the way, I didn't write it for Breitweiser. I don't know what other writers do, but I actually think about people. I mean, I think about people reading it when I'm writing it. I don't think about, not in a vacuum. That's why I like to keep it short and jaunty and fun. This is not AP physics, which I was telling Dan I got to go do with my 15-year-old son as soon as this is why I probably would rather stay on the line here for another half an hour instead of doing AP physics. But this is not a physics tech book. This is supposed to be fun to read, relaxing to read. Writing should not be a chore, in my opinion. And then another thing that I like to do when I'm writing is, though I'm speaking somewhat fondly of Breitweiser, I feel it's insulting for a writer to tell a reader what to think. And so I feel like I'm sort of like laying out all the facts, good, bad, and ugly. I hold nothing back. I have no need to make Breitweiser look better or worse than he is. And I like the reader, him or herself, to come up to like, oh, I hate this guy. Or, wow, I really like, I like you. I feel like the readers are sort of the jury, and I don't tell you what to think. And no matter what you feel at the end, dislike them or like them, you're not wrong. And so that's the kind of book I like. And I hope that if you do have a chance to read it, that you can either send me an email. My website is myname.com, Mike Finkel or michaelfinkel.com. They all go to the same spot. And you're welcome to tell me what you thought about Brightweiser. And then one little thing before I go, and I'll answer one or two more questions. But as Dan knows, I'm being so well paid for this talk. No, I'm getting absolutely nothing for spending this evening with you. Not that I'm complaining, but I would like to ask a favor for everybody here. If you are at all intrigued by this, I would love for you to read the book. If you don't like the book, let's just keep that a secret. I don't ask anybody to lie. And if you do like the book, please tell your reading friends. This is literally how I make a living and raise my family. My wife's a professor. I'm a journalist. Neither of those are roads to owning a Picasso legally. So if you do like it, please pass it on. Nothing gets me to read a book than a friend saying, "Holy moly, that book kicked ass." You can say it more eloquently. You can say it more eloquently or elegantly or you can say it in French. All right, let's give it
a couple more questions.
I
Chris?
see a hand up. I'm calling on Chris in the lower left-hand corner.
Yeah.
Two clarifications. Did he scope out what he wanted to steal for? I mean, how far ahead did he plan in terms of, going back and forth and really working out his plan? And secondarily, I understand with the glue situation, you slice it, but the cases, I don't see how things slide. Do you slice 3 sides and lift the glass out? And then how does it stick back in, or the plexiglass, or whatever it is? I'm curious about his planning process, and then how and I'm not planning on stealing any art.
I don't know about that. I'm
trying to picture doing it and then making it stick so he walks out of the room and doesn't fall off the case, that kind of thing.
Yeah, let's start with that first. I had a feeling when I was talking I wasn't being totally clear. So you work on a corner of the case and you're slicing vertically, horizontally, all of the panels in the corner. You're slicing just a little bit, just like a couple of 6 inches to the, I'm thinking of a 3-dimensional object. You're slicing all of the panels, and you can just open up that corner just enough if you've sliced the glue.
I see where it all comes together, converges all 3 lines.
Yeah. You have to think 3-dimensionally. You can sort of just put your hand through it.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then those panels want to be pushed back just by the pressure of the panels. You can just, it doesn't even take any. In fact, you pull your hand out, they pop back into place. He just has to push them in there. They want to rest pushed against each other.
I think 2 dimensions and not 3, but now when you converge in the corner, I understand that now.
Yeah, I felt a little bit time crunchy, and I felt like I wasn't being clear about that. And then your first question.
How did he plan? How much did he plan? Or did he wait till he got to the museum, perhaps?
I mean, so this is definitely discussed in the book. 201 crimes. During a Swiss trial, they listed 50 different methods he had to steal. Very often they were spontaneous crimes, like the one I just described with the objects removed for study. Other times he would go to a museum, see that there was find a piece that he was in love with, but feel that wasn't the right moment to steal it. There were too many guards, too many tourists, and he would come back knowing what he wanted to steal. But the most common thing, he was sort of obsessed with getting catalogs and brochures for museums, and he would look through these things and he would see pieces that, wow, this is potentially beautiful, but then he wouldn't know until he was in front of it, because you can't tell from a picture. Paintings, as he mentioned to me multiple times, are actually 3-dimensional. They have like little, each paint stroke has a ridge. It's beautiful. And so he would stand in front of the work of art and decide whether he had what he called a coup de coeur, a hit to the heart, a blow to the heart, whether he fell in love with it. And if he did fall in love with it, then he would see if he was able to steal it. And about 50% of the time that he wanted to steal, he did not, because of just too risky. And that's one of the reasons why I was able to get away with it for so long. But he had an amazing head, like some collectors do. He could list, not only did he describe to me all 201 of his crimes, literally piece step by step, and I'm following along with the police reports. He also described to me a couple of 100 pieces that he wasn't able to steal. And they were, in fact, the cover of the book shows this Dürer back at the top. This is a Sleeping Shepherd by Boucher. But this one is a viewer that he went to see 3 times and wanted
That's
to
why
steal.
that's there.
And he was never able to steal this one. Well, I just kind of, I mean, some people don't like the cover, but I had nothing to do with the design
I
of it. But
wondered
it's
why
so,
the bat was there. I saw the boucher, but I wondered why the bat was there. And I
yeah,
thought,
it's
Not-
also kind of like a bat, like a Batman, like a thief, like a sneaky thief.
beautiful
And then
bat,
like,
it's true.
you know, he steals and then he relaxes. He steals, then he
Right.
relaxes.
Right.
It's kind of the point of a cover of a book is to like get you to look twice, and I think it's effective. But I mean, let's see. The British went quite literal. There's the British cover. They went totally literal.
Oh,
It's like the Netflix post. It's like the Netflix poster. And I've sold it in 15 more countries, but they haven't come out yet. So I'm wondering, every country will have its. Oh, I actually saw the Japanese one, which is like this totally blank thing with just this like little like scratch. It's beautifully understated. Anyway, it's kind of fat. And that's another we can talk about all night, like how each country does the covers of their books is sort of reflects a
Yeah.
little bit of the Moors and of the. All right, this I gotta. One more question. Who's got?
All right.
I have a question.
All
Yes,
right.
Jackie, go for it.
Last
I
one
have a
of the night.
question. I want to know what happened to the girlfriend and Catherine.
I bet you do.
I think the answer's in the book.
The answer is
No.
definitely in the book. Anne Catherine and Breitweiser had the most unhealthy relationship that you can ever imagine. However, I wasn't fortunate enough to speak with Anne Catherine. She has never, ever spoken with a journalist, but I was able to talk to many people that knew her, get a hold of also her psychology reports. How did that happen? They were accidentally included with Breitweiser's. I'm not going to know. And also I got a hold of all of her police interrogations under oath. So I got to see, I got at least a decent amount of insight into her. She was an active participant in most of the thefts. And I will say that one of the reasons why she did not talk to me is because she's super smart, and it would be foolish of her to talk to me. She got away with the crimes. And how does she get away with it? I think you're gonna have to read and see what happens. The second,
Like a penal system, that's what it is.
Breitweiser had something to do with helping her get away with it. Because I was gonna say it's an unhealthy relationship, but everybody that I talked to that knew the couple, which was like 7 or 8 people, said the same thing, which is the fatal thing, which is that, oh man, there might have been an unhealthy relationship. It might have been toxic, but wow, those two loved each other. And, love can make you crazy. He loved the works of art and he stole them, and he loved his girlfriend, and they were truly in love. And so one of the things I do like about this story, you'll have to decide whether you like the book, but one of the things I like about this story is that theft after theft after theft can be a little bit cold and repetitive, but there is a true crazy love story, actually love triangle when you count the mother, in the middle of this book that I think gives it some heart. It's really kind of a Bonnie and Clyde story on some level. The relationship between, I didn't get to talk about, I mean, we only were here for an hour. I didn't get to talk about it too much. You have to pick and choose. But really the love story of Stefan Breitweiser and Anne-Catherine Kleinklaus, to me, really gives the book its beating heart. Crimes are fun, but they're soulless. Aesthetic desire is great, but really love is what moves the world and makes you do crazy things. And wow, this is an example of that.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Mike,
thank
for
you.
being with us. And I do again want to recommend The Art Thief. It's available at Vroman's in Pasadena, at your local independent bookstore. It's certainly on all the online book sellers that you can think of, from Amazon and Pals and Barnes and Noble and all the rest. And again, it's a fascinating read. If you're interested in art history, true crime, and as Mike suggests, a very unusual relationship. And I have to say, I think a triangular relationship, including Breitweiser's mother. There's a lot here to unpack psychologically, as well as which you can ignore or you can really dive into. with the spiciness of all of the crimes. Mike, thank you so much for being here. It's a distinct pleasure. We wish you great success with the book. And I when I finished, I said, "Who's going to play Brightweiser in the movie?"
Well, thank you so much. I have actually optioned the book to the movies. Everybody's on strike right now, so we'll see what
Right.
happens. We'll see who plays Brightweiser. And you know, thank you all for listening to me babble on. Please try not to steal the book. Hey, thank you so much. Have a great night. It's 9:10 over here. I got to go do
Good
some.
luck with those physics. Oh.
Yeah, right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mike.
I'm a writer. There's no physics in me, but you know, I now use the internet. Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
great
Mike.
night.
Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you again at the next event.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.